people come to our schools, they see all these wonderful projects. There are project cards on the table detailing these incredible projects. People are going out into the field and documenting the presence of salamanders that no one knew that they were living there. And it's true, like obviously every single High Tech High project is amazing and every High Tech High teacher is unbelievably talented and smart and good looking. Like these are facts, okay? Like we know this about HTH and HTH teachers. So what I want to ask is, when we're thinking of these like massive moonshot projects or like incredible tearjerker projects where we're discovering a species or someone is growing and getting accepted to college and we never thought that was possible or like the community told us that wasn't possible, well, what about the math? Like when you're running out into the woods with kids, like do they learn math? What about reading? Like when you are a teacher in an elementary classroom or you're a teacher in a high school classroom and we have English language learners and we have students who are at all different levels, like if we're out in the field all day and like, do they learn to read? Like, what about all of that stuff? Okay. Whoever wants to get us started, I'll give you 1 minute of think time. The question is in the world of PBL, what about the standards? What about the basics? Especially because the examples that we've seen of projects seem to be very big. And maybe it's hard to see how like a kid who shows up struggling to read actually learns to read when they are collecting water samples, or a kid struggling with math, like how do they learn to do that? Does that happen? Okay.
Hi, my name's Mele Sato. I teach 12th grade math over at High Tech High Media Arts. I've taught 9th through 12th, just for some perspective. I'm going to start with a general kind of answer to that question and then speak to a specific project. In general, I feel like projects drive the need to know something, the need to learn something. If you have a really good question, following that in order to answer that question becomes, ooh, I'm going to need to know how to find the maximum or minimum of some function that describes a system. Or I've got multiple equations. I'm going to need to find where they intersect because that is going to be really important. Maybe at the beginning of the project, they don't know that they're going to need to know about systems of equations, but they somehow find a place where they reach, where they're like, Mele, we have these different things, and we want to know where they meet. And I'm like, okay, that's called this, or I can help you find that. Let's learn this. And then they figure out, oh, we can talk about systems of equations, and we take a step back and we do some substitution and matrices and blah, 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 blah. So you hit those kind of standards through that. Yeah.
Hello, my name is John. I teach environmental science. And environmental science might be a class where people think that students don't read literature. And what I wanted to focus on one thing that Randy said. He said students that struggle to read. What I find is that it's more students that struggle to love reading. And that within schools, what we've really done is kind of extinguished a love of just picking up a book and reading it for the sake of reading it. And things that kind of kill a love of reading is lack of choice of what they're going to read. And then the follow-up of what happens after you read something. And so typically it's, we're going to read this because you're in 9th grade and that's what 9th graders read. And then after we read it, I'm going to make you prove to me that you read it by making you fill out basically a 5-page paper that proves to me that you read this. And so I think that any of us would struggle to love reading if that were kind of the experience within reading. And so I want to encourage us, everybody should read in all of our classes for the sake that reading is wonderful, and try to reignite that if it has been kind of squashed in children. And then also kind of thinking about how you're supporting that, what kind of choice is available within the reading.
I'm Mari Jones, and I teach 5th grade at High Tech Elementary Explorer. In terms of reading, so oftentimes, at least in the elementary projects that I've been a part of, we usually integrate literacy into the project. And so how we do that is, so let's say, so currently my class is involved in a project called The Myths and Realities of the American Dream. We're looking at American history from colonization to present day, and examining the role of the American dream in shaping that history. We have read so many historical texts, first-person narratives, we've read historical fiction, and as a teacher who's designing that curriculum for my students, especially with the littles where there's a, and probably in the bigger, older kids too, you have this big gap. And so one of the most important things is really taking time to look at the sources that students have access to and differentiating those sources. So sometimes most of the topics we cover are much higher level than most fifth graders try to cover. And so one of the things that I have to do often is rewrite texts so that my students who are lower levels of reading can access. The other thing about thinking about text is not just about text that's for reading, but you can also think of audio text, video text, and things like that in terms of projects, and that the mix of those is really, really helpful for students who have different modality strengths. And so that's one of the things that I consider when I'm planning a project.
I guess it's my turn. My name's Don McKay. I teach engineering currently to 12th graders at International. This is a dilemma that I deal with almost on a daily basis because I have taught math, I've taught science at various grade levels, but I constantly ask myself this question: should they be learning how to do math in my class, or should I be giving them opportunities to use and apply the math they've already learned? It's a yin and a yang thing, right? They need both, and they need to have the motivation for wanting to know or needing to know how to do that specific thing. I guess my pendulum is now currently at the extreme where I don't focus a lot on teaching them how to do math. I have in the past on other projects been very concentrated and will learn specific math skills. But right now, every kid is applying a role in this project. We're doing a virtual reality project, and they're actually designing artifacts to be put into a virtual model of the Presidio, one of the original Spanish structures here in California, that will be used for fourth graders in their study of California history. So they're all building objects, but some people are actually writing, they're documenting our process, they're posting on websites what we're doing, describing the various stakeholders in this project. So there's a lot of writing going on. Once a week we have a Socratic seminar where we discuss some readings on physics. So they're reading complex texts and then discussing it as a group. I really do try to give my students lots of opportunities to read, but I couldn't go through my class and say, yes, we are all doing these and this and this and this skill. Some students are going to be doing those things. They'll be diving deep in those areas, but that may be totally different. Their experience in my class is totally different than someone who's sitting right next to them, but working on a different aspect of the project. And that's, I think, where the choice comes in, too, that they're choosing to do what they're most interested in. They will dive deep, and what I really try to do in my class is teach them how to learn. Because believe me, when it comes to a project like this, the scope is so broad, I can't be their sole source of information and content. In fact, my goal is by halfway through the project, if they haven't passed my level of expertise in what they're doing, then I failed, and they failed. They've got to be past me. They have to realize after half the semester, you can't go to Dr. Don anymore. He doesn't know that answer. Go over to this person. They're the ones that figured that out. And then I know my project's worked.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to acknowledge as a school administrator that I completely agreed with more depth and less coverage. And as somebody had mentioned earlier, that's within the Common Core now. So we see that very explicitly that we can be much more skill driven, and our roles as teachers. Now that Google's there, it's not about us being these fountains of knowledge, rather in helping students understand how to access knowledge and then what to do with it to build their skills in those areas.
Let's go right over here to San Luis Obispo.
Question, just to get your 2 cents on this. If you as a staff had approximately only 2 hours per month for all of you to meet together, how would you envision best utilizing that 2 hours to do all of these. I mean, we're doing defenses of learning. We have an advisory for social, emotional, and character education at the high school level. We're doing exhibitions of learning every year and in every subject. So we're trying to do all of these things. How would you best utilize 2 hours a month as a whole staff?
That's an awesome question. How many people relate to that question in some way? All right.
I think the biggest struggle is making meeting time feel relevant to everybody. And so I think the best thing to do in order to make it feel relevant to everybody is provide options within meeting space. So if you have 2 hours, I mean, if you really look at that, if you created 5 options, that's actually 10 hours of meeting time that could be that much more relevant. And I think that there's a bit of pre-gaming to that. So it's looking at, if you're going to be part of this group, we're going to be looking at project tuning protocols. And so bring a project. If you're in this group, we're going to be looking at dilemma protocols. So bring a dilemma. And that there's choice of your teachers and they can kind of fit into the groups where it feels most relevant. And then I think you're going to have the most kind of connection. It's going to feel most useful.
I just want to appreciate that because it's something that maybe we don't really have to struggle with a lot. We have a lot of time, not really built into the day, but we meet every single morning before school as a staff. And so that's a tough thing. But I really appreciate what he said about just being thoughtful about what it is that people are doing, because nobody, I mean, we're all educators and nobody in here wants to just sit at another meeting for the sake of meeting. So I think whatever it is that you guys are thinking about doing as a staff, whatever that collective piece that you're going to be working on, whether it's exhibitions, whether it's presenting student work to parents, whatever that piece is, I would do that really, really strongly and dedicate some time to doing that. I found that over the years, like we try to do too much sometimes. We're going to do this, and we're going to do really good at this, and we're going to improve on this, and and then we kind of lose track of, you know, the main focus of the thing that we're supposed to be doing originally. So I guess that would be my only push, is like figure out what it is that you guys really value as a staff that you want to see from your students, and figure out how to do that collectively. School starts at 8:50 and we have to be there at 7:45. So, I mean, 50 minutes, yeah. But it's, you know, every day has a purpose. So one day is a staff meeting, and one day we're doing improvement groups, and one day we're doing, you know, meeting with our teaching teams, and one day, so everything's got, you know, meaning behind it.
Just to weigh in on the thing that I feel most edified by in our meetings, project tunings. I think it's difficult for us, even as close to the unit of faculty and staff as we are. Each of our schools only has about 25 teachers, so it's not like I'm trying to interact with 200 people, which makes a big difference. But even there, when I get isolated in my project designs, and unless I'm forced to sort of share that, it's not something I'm going to naturally do. I don't want to put myself out there when the project is still in its beginnings, and yet a project tuning protocol forces me to do that. And then I get lots of really valuable input. I really learned to value that time. If that was the only thing that I could do with the staff, if I could only do one thing, that would be the one thing that I would be most reluctant to give up.
Dr. Dunn, you talked about in your class, you sort of being like an air traffic controller, you having kids go seek other kids who have
And there
expertise.
are crashes.
Yeah.
Midair, everything, yeah.
Yeah, so you also talked about different expertise that's developed throughout different students. What do you do with the kid who seeks the path of least resistance, who maybe isn't challenging him or herself enough?
Yeah, that's an interesting dilemma, and one I had our last semester project, which we also did virtual reality, we had a slightly different format, and we divided up the teams. When we made the teams, I put them together as dynamic groups, so you could fire somebody on your team. Or you didn't really fire them, although that could have happened. You really only hired them for as long as you needed that expertise. And so everybody became a specialist in one of the roles, and they hired themselves out. So basically, if you weren't good at what you did, you didn't get hired. And if you didn't get hired, you didn't get a salary. If you didn't get a salary, their salary was directly proportional to your grade. So eventually it came back to the grade, and that's, you know, that may or may not have motivated them. But the fact that they weren't being hired, and then what did we do with the kids that weren't getting hired? We put them in professional development. and we gave them time, and we would pay them in unemployment insurance, which I taxed all the other groups. They had to actually chip money into the professional development fund. The kids could earn money by doing that, making their skills better, improving on their skills, and becoming them for more employable. And that was sort of my, sort of an innovative way of looking at that problem. It's a serious problem. At our schools, I mean, I'm teaching seniors. They've been through our program, some of them 6, 7 years. They know that the peer pressure on them to contribute to the group is intense sometimes. And we really don't have that problem in our culture as much as maybe you do in yours. But there are, I'm still sure, every project I'm trying to think, how am I going to get that kid that doesn't want to participate? And when you teach engineering to every single senior in your school, it's not an elective. These aren't the nerds. I need to motivate a lot of unmotivated students around engineering. So that's always a challenge to me.
I think that goes back to the student voice thing too. So thinking about what he said, like we kind of, okay, nobody does what he does. How many people want to take his class? Like right now, I want to. But yeah, what we did was kind of similar. We had the kids break down, like we broke down what we wanted our project goals to be into various groups. And so then we let the kids kind of apply for the group that they wanted to be in. And so by giving them those, 8 different choices of things to do, we found that they were much more motivated to do said thing, because it wasn't like we're forcing everybody to do this. Everybody had to learn the basics of everything, and then once they learned the basics, it was like, okay, who wants to be on the, we're doing a project on looking at how human behavior affects biodiversity. So it was like, who wants to raise trout in the classroom, and who wants to go certify restaurants as ocean friendly, and who wants to, and so everybody had to go look, kind of hear the pitch about what everything's going to be about. And then it became you apply for the job, and your team got put together that way. And it's just kind of interesting. We just didn't really have that problem, because a lot of the kids that need sort of more of the task-oriented things, we kind of knew our students well enough to know this guy's going to do really, really well if we put him in something that is just task-oriented, it's repetitious, it's something that he can keep track of. We know that this person is really type A, they need something to manage, they need something that, they're going to be calling restaurants as a 13-year-old and talking to general managers, like, perfect. So it's kind of a two-way street between them getting to pick and you also knowing your students well enough to know like where they might thrive.
One more thing that I would add to that is this idea of a public exhibition of learning is really motivating for a lot of kids. So if they know that at the end of this they're presenting their work, even your students who are less motivated know that their work is out there, right? And they know they have to talk about their whole process and what was their contribution to this group. And for a lot of them, that is a big motivator, because they are presenting to not just their families, but oftentimes the public. And so that's a big piece that helps them to step it up a little bit, that it's not just the teacher that's going to see this. It's more than that.
I think we have time for about one more question. You've answered every question? Okay. 2 more questions. All right. Here, we'll start here and then pass it over there.
So I just had a quick question about class size at this school. How big are your classes generally?
I'm in the middle school, so we have 26 or 7 in each of our classes.
24.
26.
Okay, I was just curious when you were talking about the unmotivated kid, and you were talking about this hiring business. So, is it like dodgeball where some kids don't get picked because they don't have the skill sets and they're just far enough behind the rest of the kids?
Yeah, this was an interesting dynamic in this particular project, because as you can imagine, we had a selection process for choosing. We could do 12 worlds, 12 virtual worlds. That's how many resources we figured we had. There are 50 kids, so about 4 kids per world would be allocated over the course of the project. The people who were chosen as the leaders of each world had in their mind, I'll just hire my friends. I'll employ them full time. Don't worry, guys, you only have to do about 2 weeks worth of work for a 6-week project. I'll give you the money, we'll have a great time. That happened in a couple of groups. As soon as I caught wind of that, I sat the group leaders down and I said, now you realize that if you hire your friends and you don't really hold them to the task, and you create an inferior product, guess whose grade suffers? The group leader's grade suffers. Yeah, that you just gave your A to your friends, you just earned yourself an F. Immediately, we had renegotiation of their employment contracts. They, all of a sudden, other people were starting to get included. It became a meritocracy at that point. So yeah, those kinds of things happen, and you have to roll with the punches.
I think I'm going to speak from the other end of the spectrum. So it's this idea of using the words unmotivated, and I think of it as kind of barriers between the student and engagement. And I think that talking about creating roles that are incentivized by points in hiring and firing ultimately is a way to motivate. I think that that's a bit extrinsic. And I think that I prefer to see it as engagement, and these students have these barriers that keep them from engaging. I really haven't met too many students that, actually I haven't met any students that don't want to do well. And there's these things that keep them from engaging, and that might be that they don't feel like the work is unusual to them, and they might not see the relevance of it. They might feel that they attend a school but don't belong at the school. And I think of it like that in terms of barriers, and that's why the class sizes should be small, so that you know students well and can identify if they have those types of barriers, and that you can work with that with a team of teachers that care about a kid. I don't think that we all solve all these things as individuals. We kind of solve it as teams of people that care about kids for years and years and years and years and years, and that ultimately that's what we're chipping away at. And that there are immediate solutions to that, which is kind of engagement and involvement and within the moment of a project, but then there's this longer running thing of acting as people that remove barriers and maintain that with students. Do I have a protocol on a particular kid? Oh, dilemma protocol? We do it kind of with teachers, and it's dilemma or a problem, this thing we're experiencing in our class, so it could very much, and yeah, so what have you tried kind of thing, and then we all get together with groups of teachers to talk about those types of things.
How do you deal with the attendance issues? A class of 40, you have 10 people that are missing in a given week, and they miss. How do you handle that? Or sometimes kids that are missing 5 to 10 days.
How do you handle absences?
You don't have kids miss that many. Yeah.
We, at our school, if a family wants to go on like a vacation or something like that for like 10 days, they have to sit down with the director and have like a rather extensive meeting. And at that time, she would inform them that like this absence would really hurt not only that child, but also the other children that they may be working with for that project. And so as the school, like I work over at HT, which is brand new, or we're in our second year, so the longer that we're around and established, then I think attendance tends to get stronger as it's like the expectation. Are kids sick? Of course they are. You know, and then we just have to make accommodations based on that. But long absences are not as big of a problem.
I think what John was talking about with a team of teachers coming together and us building relationships with our students really has helped me deal with absences, especially with project expectations. If they're working in a group, the relationship that's established with the student allows them the next morning they return to say, hey, Melly, I've been out. Can we meet at lunch? Can we talk about how I can make sure, you know, I'm learning and I don't fall behind? You know, each student has an advisor as well. So I think the relationship really falls into that, because then things can be altered. Because it isn't about turning in all these things. Maybe my whole goal for this one assignment was, so they missed that class activity, but what I would like them to communicate to me is their knowledge of blank, and they can do that another way. It doesn't have to be exactly the same way as those
So I have a
students.
question about kind of time usage, and I don't know if I can frame this well. Would you say, as you're working in projects, that, you know, beginning to end of a project, are you going from project to project to project in a course of, let's say, a semester? Are you using a project as kind of an umbrella, and you're teaching within that Do you have a time in between where you're working on skill sets or whatever, directed stuff? While goes by, project happens again. I'm trying to get sort of your arc in my brain. And it's different in different disciplines, yes? So I'm a biology teacher, just so you know where I'm coming from. Okay, that's my question.
I guess I can speak to last semester. I feel like for me, the project should be that umbrella. Shouldn't be like we learn all these things and then we do a project. Last semester we did this election project where I posed a question at the beginning. It was like a 9-week-long project. You know, does my vote matter? Is it possible to become an informed and unbiased citizen or, so that I can make a decision? You know, that was a question that I'd been struggling with forever. But those 2 questions launched reading primary documents, learning about the Federalist Papers. And I teach math. So obviously, like, I'm moving towards a very political science kind of classroom where we're talking about demographics. So then we have to learn about statistics. We're talking about voting theory. So what does one vote mean in one state versus the other? And so you're talking about voting indices. And you're talking about different kinds of voting processes that the mayor of San Francisco uses, or San Francisco uses for the mayoral races, and rank order method, and different kinds, and we're doing all these calculations, but all of that is under that umbrella question of, does my vote matter? You know, and to answer that, there's going to be a lot of different things that each kid is going to learn and take with them. But I guess it's that driving question at the beginning.